Hello, my name is Matt Whitman. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast where we work through a book of the Bible a little bit every weekday morning. Right now we're working on the book of Matthew. We've made it all the way to Matthew 27, which is really exciting. But if you're new, don't leave. You don't have to go back and start all the way from the beginning. You can just pick it up here. If you like it, you can go back and start from the beginning later. I'm just thrilled that you're here. Thank you for jumping into this thing. I know it can be intimidating to jump into a thing all the way right in the middle. And also, hey, we're almost done with the book of Matthew, which means we're about to start a new book. You can get in at the ground floor in real time with us, so you can mentally prepare for that, file it away. If you are here for the first time, then it may be news to you that I really like sports. All of the sports. I particularly like American football. It's a beautiful, violent game. I played football for a while. I enjoy that aspect of it too. But I also like the psychology of football and what it's like to watch football games with fans of different teams. So the other day, a while back now, I'm watching a game with a buddy who has a really strong rooting interest in the football game we're watching, but I don't care at all. The offensive team is his team, and there's a play where there's a completed pass, and one of the offense's receivers is running down the field with the ball. Well, relatively recent rule in American football is if you're playing defense, trying to tackle the ball carrier, you can't lower your head and strike their head. You can't go helmet-to-helmet contact. Yeah, they're trying to cut back on injuries. That's probably a good thing. But that can be very difficult to officiate, and in this case, it was. The defender comes up. He's doing everything right. He gets down and in position to make the tackle. Well, then the offensive player kind of slips and then tries to tuck his head, and the offensive player actually goes and smacks the defensive player's helmet with his helmet, and out comes the penalty flag, and the defensive player gets in trouble, gets penalized. That's a big penalty for that. And my buddy who was rooting for the offensive team was like, yeah, absolutely. That's ridiculous. You got to get that out of the game. That's insane. But I'm looking at it as someone who's pretty dispassionate about this game. I'm like, I don't know. It doesn't look like you did anything wrong. And it really just comes down to our rooting interest and not the reality of the facts of the case in question at all. Likewise, in Matthew 27, in this trial of Jesus before Pilate, we're getting the same kind of deal. You got two parties here who are looking at the case of Jesus. You got Pilate, who's like me in the analogy. Like, I don't know. I care about other things. I just don't really care about this that much. I don't get it. I don't see what the big deal is. Like, honestly, it just doesn't look like the guy did anything wrong. I don't really find any fault in him. Are we sure I have to throw a penalty flag here? Really? I don't know that I agree with that. And then you've got the crowds who are kind of like the hometown rooting team who see something absolutely egregious going on from their perspective, and they are going to throw a gigantic fit and make morally bold claims about how the things ought to be. Matthew is trying really hard to point out that one of the two parties is wildly biased and has much to gain from a conviction, and that the other party, the one that actually has the authority to swing the sword, metaphorically speaking, is actually going to use a cross here, isn't really motivated by bias one way or another, and it isn't even really clear to him whether crucifying Jesus or not crucifying Jesus would be politically expedient. Pilate really does come off like the extremely neutral positioned character here. It'd be another thing if Matthew was giving us a portrait of Pilate by which it was like, oh, Pilate knew that he needed to do this or his goose was cooked. No, it looks like Pilate's goose is cooked by the reality that the situation exists before he even gets into making a decision one way or the other. And so ultimately he tries to make no decision at all or as close to a non-decision as he can. And, well, the non-decision in this case is to allow for or even order the execution of Jesus. But the other party, Matthew is holding out as being very biased, not being clear-headed. In the same way, it's super easy for you to see through the biases in that football example I just gave. So the attentive reader should have no trouble seeing through the biases here. So we got this situation where Pilate tries a couple different things. He's like, I don't know. According to another one of the stories about Jesus over in John, Pilate's like, let's send him back to your rulers for a minute and just see what they think. And they're like, well, we can't really do anything about that. We think he's bad too. We're going to send him back to you, Pilate. What are you going to do? You're the one who has the power to swing the sword. And Pilate's like, okay, how else can I weasel out of this? Because it doesn't look like a penalty flag should be thrown here. Well, what about this Passover tradition? You guys remember this one? We let somebody go. What if I just let Jesus go? You could just have him and like, oh yeah, he's guilty. We'll like say, yeah, don't do any more King of the Jewsing. That was very wrong, but we'll still let him go. Like we don't need to kill him over that, but he'll get like sanctioned or something. And the crowd is like, no, we want the murderer Barabbas. Give us him instead. Crucify Jesus. And Pilate's like, come on. Seriously, you're not going to let me off the hook for this, are you? And so he comes back and he says, after being warned in a dream by his wife, after evaluating it himself and being like, I just don't think this is a good idea, after his actions make it crystal clear that he just doesn't want anything to do with this, and after his offer of placating them by saying, yep, Jesus was naughty, but we're going to release a prisoner, is rejected, he comes back and he's like, well, what shall I do then with Jesus who's called the Christ? That is, paraphrase here, if you all want Barabbas released so bad, Pilate asked. And they all answered, crucify him. And then Pilate comes back again in verse 23 of Matthew 27. He says, why? What crime has he committed? They don't answer the question. That part was paraphrased too. But they shouted all the louder, crucify him. Pilate is asking the objective question here. Was that a penalty? Did the defender lower his head and strike his opponent with the helmet? Or, continuing the metaphor, would it be better to look at that play and say, that's painful but incidental contact that just happens and nobody really violated any rules here. We just shouldn't throw a flag, even though we acknowledge there was an incident and there was some discomfort. But in all of that, Pilate is just trying to pin him down. Like, can you give me something to stand on here? Can you give me some kind of language that I could report back home? They help me understand what he did that is so wrong that you guys are so excited to have the murderer released to you and to have Jesus executed, because I'm just not seeing the penalty here. And he does not get civil discourse as a reaction. They don't come back and be like, well, let's run through some of the charges and here's some of the finer points of our law. And I think if you look a little more closely at Roman law, you'll see that what he did here, and here could be problematic. We're going straight Lord of the Flies instead. We are going straight hometown rooting interest, shriek at the TV, yell at the refs without any consequences whatsoever. I want this outcome because, well, if I don't get it, it's devastating for my team in my case. And that's what we see here. We see runaway madness. We see the insanity of the situation. We see the brokenness of humanity on full display. There's no reason to kill Jesus. None other than political assassination. Now, we've talked before about how the ancient Athenians had the practice of ostracization, and they would use it to eliminate someone who became so powerful that they would destabilize the political conversation. If we had that power in the United States today, I would use it on Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, Mitch McConnell. You see what I'm doing? If we could use the power of ostracization to just eliminate, not kill, good heavens, but like the Athenians did it, just eliminate everyone who's creating this logjam mess that's a divisive, ruinous thing that we can't get past, I would use it on like half of our ruling political class and just make them go away. You can keep your money, you can keep your stuff. You just can't be involved in leadership for 10 years. I think the Athenians said it was 8 years. There's a reason that these kind of tools have existed in societies in the past to deal with, without shedding blood, people whose mere presence, even if they were good guys, is just making a mess. And I'm sure some of the people on the list that I just read off to you, you're like, wait, don't get rid of that guy or that lady. I think they're super. It doesn't matter. This age-old practice that existed not just in Athens, but in many ancient Near Eastern and Mediterranean cultures to get rid of the political problems without killing anybody, it was there because the only other alternative is wait for years for the logjam to break loose, which is the situation we're in my country right now. Or the only other solution was go and do something horribly violent to undo it. Or the only other solution was just wait for the runaway train that's just, it's coming, and we're just going to sit here on the tracks until this runaway train that we're not allowed to divert or stop just comes and runs over everything. So I get the impulse of the religious leaders. It's not just at all, but they're looking at it and they're saying Jesus is a threat to the establishment we have in place. He's a threat to us. I'm sure they had talked themselves into thinking that he was a threat to the entirety of the people. Caiaphas says as much when famously he remarks, sometimes it's good for one guy to die for the well-being of the entire nation. Okay, I get their motives, and that's me giving maximum benefit of the doubt to the people who are shrieking that they want Jesus dead. But the reality is here that the only pressure valve release that was available in this moment to Pontius Pilate under these political circumstances, the cheapest, easiest, most achievable, highest likelihood of success behavior or choice for Pontius Pilate here is just kill the one guy. Like, you can't kill all the high priests. You can't send the Roman legions down into the temple courts again to solve another problem. Pilate's tried that 4 or 5 times. It's gone really badly. The easiest release of the pressure valve is just to kill Jesus, but he doesn't want to own it. And the people who want Jesus dead, they're not interested at all in articulating why Jesus needs to go away. Rather than saying we just need him to go away for this all to keep working, they're still trying to make believe that this is some very just, very needed, very moral, very noble killing that needs to happen here because of how very, very much they just love justice and doing the right thing. Pilate's politically savvy, at least to a certain extent. I mean, he's a talented Roman politician who's been given charge over a governorship of a major province. He can't be a total hack. And so I have to think that he knows the game as a veteran politician here. He knows what this is. He asked his question. Nobody's answering the question. Okay. Yeah, this is a power play. I've seen this trick before. I know where this is going, and there's no getting it right. And so Pilate responds thusly. Verse 24, when Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, but that instead an uproar was starting, he took water and he washed his hands in front of the crowd. I'm innocent of this man's blood, he said. It is your responsibility. And in this strange, perverse echo of the moment in Matthew 10 where Jesus sends out the disciples with the message of truth, and he's like, if you run into people who aren't of peace, just dust off your sandals and move on. So here Pontius Pilate runs into people who are not of peace, and he's like, fine, here's my gesture. This is the hand equivalent of dusting off sandals. I'm dusting off my hands with water, holds them up, boom, looky there. See those? Those are clean. And tomorrow, we're going to talk about what their response is to Pilate's gesture absolving himself of the blood guilt for Jesus of Nazareth. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.